Well, welcome again. It's really great to see so many of you returning to our sessions, and great to see, as I mentioned before, a growing and loyal international audience too. I'm Sophie Jump and the co-founder with Richard Siddle of the One Step Beyond concept, which creates events for the drinks industry wrapped around consumer, technology and innovation. Before we kick off, I'd just like to give a quick shout out to our partners, Wine and Spirit Trade Association, which represents over 30 drinks companies in the UK, PIX, which is the much talked about and recently launched wine discovery platform, connecting wine lovers to retailers directly, Stranger, which is one of our industry's most renowned brand development, design and packaging agencies, and Freixenet Copestick, one of the fastest growing and influential drinks brand businesses. So thank you to you all. So today's whirlwind, One Step Beyond, will focus very much on the interactions between brands and changing consumer behaviors, with a specific look at the digital medium of Instagram, as well as a discussion about international D2C and global e-commerce. So I'd like to introduce you to our panel of brilliant speakers. They're going to wave as I mention their names. So Tamar Kazriel, hi Tamar, who has the exciting job title of futurist. And also I noticed once had a position as head of knowledge. I'd have loved to have had that job. Tamar will talk about scenario planning for the future based on an understanding of consumer, social and technological change. Richard Morley. Hi, Richard. He's the founder of First Pour, which is a social media marketing agency. And Richard will look at the do's and don'ts of influencer marketing. And next on that subject, we have Georgia Panagopoulou. I'm so sorry, I've probably pronounced that horribly, Georgia. She's a digital wine marketer and a successful influencer on Instagram with over 112,000 followers. And she'll tell us a bit from the shop floor, as it were. Robert Chin, give us a wave, Robert. There he is. He's CEO of the Aquilini Beverage Group, which is a leading North American drinks producer with a large portfolio of wine brands. And Richard Siddle will be interviewing him on brand building fast, probably fast interview and fast brand building. Paul Marbray, Paul, give us a wave. He's the CEO and founder of PIX, and Paul will share his experiences on building the PIX brand and also join in a brief discussion about the future of international D2C. If you didn't know that, Paul, you do now. And we'll round up with a conversation on sustainable brand building around consumer attitudes and expectations with Robert, who's already said hello, Kevin Shaw. Gives a wave, Kevin, founder of Stranger, and Robin Copestick, who's the CEO of Freixenet Copestick. Go on, Robin, give us a call. Please answer any questions via the Q&A, and our guys will answer them as we go along, just in case we don't have time to address them or discuss them at the end of the session. Richard, would you like to add a few words?
Yeah, no, well, just to say thanks a lot for everyone for joining us. And yeah, we've hopefully got a nice mixture of panel debates and presentations. And yeah, just really pleased to be able to bring consumer insights and innovation to the drink sector again. So thanks a lot, and let's get on with the show.
Yeah, so can I ask all our panelists now, apart from Tamar, to turn off their audio and video, and Tamar's going to launch into her session on scenario planning for the future.
Okay, thank you very much. It's suddenly incredibly sunny here. It's actually been cloudy all day, so forgive me if you can't quite see me or I can't quite see you. Yes, so I am a futurist, and I tend to look at the sort of medium-term future for organisations, by which we usually mean 3 to 5 years, or sometimes even a bit more than that, 10 years, 15 years. But when you get that far out, then things start to get very uncertain indeed. And what I want to talk about today briefly is future planning. It's kind of a whistle-stop tour of future planning and how you can do it. And I think recent events and what a year it has been, have actually shown us what are the limits, but also the potential of future planning and adaptability and resilience. So there are some people who are incredibly bad at prediction. I've just got one example here. It could have been a number of different people in the quote. But in fact, future planning is not about predicting the future. It's about being prepared for a number of different scenarios that may occur and rehearsing what we might do when they happen. And when things get really difficult is actually when innovation can occur and sometimes some really surprising solutions to problems that we've only just confronted. Of course, there's some people, Boris Johnson is a good example, who are also not that good at planning, but whatever situation you're in, if you have the chance to rehearse and to prepare a little bit, you're always going to come out a bit better. There is a question, of course, about when is the good time to do some planning and do some preparation. And it's not always easy to see the things coming. And I wish I could say that I completely predicted the nightmare of the last 18 months. I didn't, of course. But in fact, rather than obsessing around the slightly tricky situation we have going on in the UK at the moment, which some of you may be aware of in terms of fuel and supply chain disruption and the prospect of empty shelves, the really amazing thing about the supply chain here, actually, I think, is how resilient it's been and how little empty shelves we've seen so far. And much of the problem is around people's concerns of the threat of those shelves emptying. And I think one of the reasons for that is actually most of the supermarkets, the grocery chains in this country, they do some, and they have done for a long time, a lot of long-range future planning. So I was involved with Tesco some years back when they were doing some future planning and considering what they could do in the event of a different plague. In that time, it was bird flu, but went through and thought about the way that the supply chain would likely be disrupted. And I think it's because of that kind of longer term thinking that if you're willing to have a go, then you're more likely to be able to be nimble and to rehearse and to think, well, what would we do? What can we do? And similarly, in the drinks industry, there's been some incredible adaptability and innovation, people going online, all sorts of ways of thinking how to deal with a, missing on trade and all the rest of it. So some wonderful things can happen, perhaps when you don't quite expect them. So there is an issue around when is a good time to do some future planning. And there's definitely a sort of sweet spot between that point on the left of complacency, when organizations think things are pretty much okay and we're doing okay and market share is kind of fine, to that point on the right when you're absolutely panicking and just firefighting. I don't think there's many organizations left in that comfortable, complacent spot anymore. But at the same time, again, I think the events of the last few months have shown people how resilient they can be. So what I'm suggesting here is that if you possibly can, take a moment, get your team to take a moment to step back and think about the different scenarios that might occur, what might happen. And again, the events of the last few months have changed what futurists call wildcards. So wildcards, when you're thinking about the future, are those really crazy, unlikely events that if they do happen, they're going to completely subvert the situation. And usually you sort of consider them in order to disregard them. So for example, if an asteroid comes and lands and blows up the world, well, there's not much point in doing future planning for that scenario because you won't be there. But I think what has surprised people is how they could have this nightmare global plague and still survive and still carry on and sometimes grow as well. And so in that way, it's really expanded the way people are able to think about the future and what might happen. And some of the stuff that may have been disregarded as too crazy or too out there actually can maybe get a look in and maybe find some attention, somebody to listen to all of that. So one of the most common techniques for future planning is something called scenario planning, which I'm guessing some of you may be quite familiar with, which can be a very technical and drawn out and long process. But essentially, it's a very simple idea that you think about different possible ways that the world could go, and then you paint the scenarios for what the world could look like in those cases, and then you think about what your response could be. So one of the ways to think about all the different things that might happen to your organization is, if you just think of your business and the universe that your business operates in, and then take a bit of time to think about all the different things that impact your business, that affect your business, everything from regulation, the competition, whoever supplies you, whatever your raw material is, the channels, how that gets there, your customer, perhaps your customer's customer. And if you can find the time and give yourself or your team the permission, it doesn't have to be, I mean, it can be 6 months if you want, but it could just be an afternoon to just say, well, actually, what are the changes going on and what really might happen here? And even if you don't do the future planning off the back of this, it can be a really useful exercise, because if you say we're going to go right back to first principles and rethink our competition, then it's an opportunity to think, well, maybe, yes, if I'm a wine brand, maybe my competition is other wines, but actually the competition in terms of consumer attention and consumer spend could be anything which allows people to have something delicious, anything which allows people to celebrate, anything which allows people to connect, and so on. And it's when you put these things together that you start to think about not just future risks and how you can avert them, but also perhaps different channels to market, different consumer sets that you maybe haven't been talking to, and so on. So what you typically do in a classic scenario planning exercise is to look at all the different things that you think it might affect your business. Let's say you're focusing on the profitability of your business, and you try and isolate the ones which are the highest impact, but also the most uncertain. Because if something is certain that it's going to happen, well, then you know you have to plan for it. But if you're not sure if it could go either way, then you can start to build a scenario around either it happening or it not happening. So you typically build a nice 4-box matrix, and you put a scenario in each one, and you think, well, it could look like this, and what would we do if the world ended up looking like this? How would we respond? Alternatively, if that feels a bit too technical and it doesn't chime with the culture that you have, it can simply just be some time dedicated to thinking, what if this happened? What if something fabulous happened? It doesn't all have to be this negative nightmare scenario the whole time, but giving yourself permission, your organization permission to think of these things, to stop fighting fires for a moment and start to think, well, if this happened, what would we do? So future planning really is just about considering how are we going to manage all these different risks, and how can we rehearse for the best and rehearse for the worst. So if this stuff does come about, we can move just that little bit faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara, very much. Can you come out of your screen share? Well, we're now going to move on. Richard, do you want to, Richard and Georgia, you stay with us because you'll be part of this discussion after Richard's done his presentation. Do you want to share your screen, Richard?
Yeah, I can kick off straight away. Apologies, I haven't recorded this, so I don't know how long it's going to take. I haven't tested. Sorry, Sophie. If it goes over, I'll do my best to speed things up.
Come in and shriek at you.
Yeah, please. Well, look, first of all, thanks Sophie and Richard for having us on the show, and obviously thank you very much to all of the sponsors for having us here as well. As a quick introduction to what I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to talk through 4 main things. First being a quick introduction to who we are, what we do. We're then going to look into what influencer marketing is. We're then going to talk about why is it important and how to run a campaign. Right, so as a quick intro to Firstport, we were founded in 2019 by myself and my business partner, Laura Seal. We've both been working in the publishing industry for quite some time. I've been working at Cantor for about 8 years, Laura there for about 4. I then left as when I was, after I guess kind of 8 years having been head of sales. Laura then was working on the editorial side of things. When we launched Firstport, the reason behind it, I guess, was that we realized how far behind the wine market is to other industries when it comes to social media and digital marketing. And also, like the second side of things is the potential to bring wine brands to life, especially to younger audiences, like millennial, Gen Z audiences, through digital storytelling, virtual events, and targeted outreach strategies. The 2 sort of areas that we work on mostly are account management and wine influencer marketing. Wine account management are things like content creation, community management, outreach, and ad campaigns. For the wine influencer side of things, we do sourcing, briefing, managing, and reporting for campaigns for our clients. Since we've launched Firstport 2 years ago, we have been responsible for hundreds of influencer posts and stories, generated tens of thousands of interactions, and our campaigns have reached millions of consumers worldwide. But we're here today to talk about what influencer marketing is, and I kind of, as a quick overview, like it's worth noting that influencer marketing is not a new concept. It's something that has it's made up of 2 basic elements that have been around since the beginning of consumerism. One of those being the concept of advice from someone you trust, your next door neighbor who advises to you that you should buy a lawnmower that they really like and recommend. In the wine industry, this would be like your SOM or your shop staff when you walk into a retailer, for instance. The other one is the desire to emulate those who you look up to or aspire to. In this instance, here is a great industry example. David Beckham, obviously, behind the Hague Club brand. The main sort of difference between these people and social media and influencers is that social media gives consumers the ability to interact and connect with those people. Something that you can't do, I guess, talking to David Beckham through the TV doesn't quite work. But the question is, I guess, on everyone's lips, does it work? Yes, it does, if it's done effectively. A really good example of this is Great Wall, who worked with this gentleman here, Lee. Sorry for the bad pronunciation. Lee Chikwi, I believe is the way that you say it. He is a lifestyle influencer who has over 40 million followers on TikTok, and he's reportedly sold 20,000 6-bottle cases of Great Wall's wine within 30 seconds. That just shows you how much influence he has over his audience and how actually it can directly lead to sales for people. So what are influencers? And the different types of influencers there are out there, I guess, is so we have different ways that we categorize people in the industry. The sort of key one, I guess, is what you have in front of you here, which is by reach. So you have your nano influencers. These are kind of up and coming influencers, people with really engaged audiences who have loads of influence over their followers. An example of these kind of people are people working in the trade and who have like a kind of side hustle, I guess, of putting out posts about the drinks that they're having and what they like. And these are kind of leaning on your more kind of friend or neighbor scale of the kind of neighbor versus celebrity scale. You then have your micros. Micros are dedicated communicators. They're more sort of full-time people. They devote themselves to communicating about wine in this instance. They're usually highly engaged, have highly engaged audiences and strong influence over their followers. They're kind of a good mix between sort of your friend next door and a celebrity. Their kind of, I guess, kind of follower bracket is, we say, between 8,000 and 50,000 followers. You then have your macro influencers, who are kind of generally full-time communicators. They have, again, still have engaged audiences, but you tend to find their kind of like to reach ratio starts to dip a little bit, and that's just because they have so many people who follow them, but they do tend to have sort of less influence on each of those people, but they obviously have a lot more people to influence and who follow them. A good example of this is Georgie, who's actually on the show with us today. And then you have your kind of all-stars who tend to be more your kind of celebrities, influence and things like this. And we don't really have many of those in the wine industry. We like to categorize influencers by the type of influence that they are. We have your kind of like informal influencers who are kind of like wine influencers, travel and lifestyle influencers, or kind of photographers. Like in this instance, you've got Drink in Moderation, who does some really fun, oops, sorry, I'll pull that down, posts. You then got your kind of educators who are a bit more formal. These are your wine critics, wine bloggers, educators, somms, or trade professionals. And then you've got your kind of like foodie areas, foodie bracket of influencer. And these tend to be your chefs, food critics, bloggers, foodie influencers, and pairing experts. So now we're going to look into why influence marketing is important and should be considered by you and your brands. Now, I think since everyone's noticed since the lockdown, there's been a huge increase in sales, as you can see here from Wine Intelligence, of wine online directly to people's doors through digital sales. And I think I'm pretty sure all of you here have ordered wine during lockdown as well, and are probably now receiving e-newsletters from those companies that you've ordered from. And this trend is not something that is going to be changing. There are more people who are going to be working from home, who can accept deliveries, and you know, every day, let's say, and you know, with companies such as Pix, who obviously Paul's on here at the moment, you know, coming in, more and more people are going to be using, selling wine online, and this is something that we really need to pay attention to. But you know, and as a result, we need to really create a digital footprint. But the question is, like, where do we do that? Now, a study found that you know, in 2020, people spent an average of 145 minutes of every day on social media. This number increased even more with millennials, and even more than that with Gen Z, which means that on average, people are spending about 10% of their days on social media. And if you, I guess, kind of even consider like sleeping into the mix, you're looking at more like 16 to 17%. So it just shows you just how much people are on there, and the reason why you need to, I guess, get involved with social and have a presence there. We've also got a study here from YouGov who enforces, you know, shows you that 84% of people in the US have social media and engage with it on a regular basis. But I guess the kind of question is, are they listening to the stuff that's being put out there? And, you know, in a survey by Wine Intelligence, we're seeing that 40% of your sort of general consumers are listening, and they do find that social media influences their purchasing decisions. In the UK, people have, it's a bit of a tougher crowd, as expected, I guess. But it is interesting to see that people do listen to bloggers and to industry experts, which again, I guess, kind of, as I said to you before, is part of social media. Those people do use social media for their own digital footprint. Oh, wrong one, sorry. But how does the kind of social influencer fit in? I mean, I guess the kind of issue here, I guess, with kind of recommendations is that when you go to a shop, when you walk into a shop, you're presented with like a bottle. You give it in front of you, you can pick it up, you can touch the label, you can see what it's like. You can speak to somebody, they can advise you on it, the song can give you some guidance. But if you do that on the digital world, there isn't that ability to do that. So what social media influence marketing does is they give, I guess, kind of, you as a company will send an influencer on that consumer journey. They'll have that experience and they'll be a trusted person to present that to their followers, giving sort of your brand the impression of transparency and I guess giving consumers the trust to be able to purchase the wine. So then we move into how to run a consumer campaign. Well, number one for running any marketing campaign is that you need to have, to have a strong objectives means that you will have stronger campaigns. You need to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. For instance, we work with a lot of regional bodies, and their objective is often to talk about their regions, educate people, give them brand awareness. A really good example of what we've done here is we worked with the DO Carver this year. We've worked on a campaign through the space of the year. We've worked with, I think it's about 20 plus influencers, who each of them were given a pillar of Carver, and they were throughout the year given 5 times of the year to explain what that pillar meant. So we're talking bottle aging, grape varieties, this kind of thing. One of them is actually Georgia, who's on the show, and she's doing a load of tastings this week with us. We also have, then you kind of look at your, whereas if you're a direct-to-consumer producer or a retailer, you're maybe looking at a completely different strategy. And we're working with a company called Clutter, who are a online auction house. What they want to do with us is create, their objective was to increase the amount of people who are buying from their platform. And so what we did with them is that we've given them influencers a budget to buy wines and to have that experience of buying the wines online. And we've targeted, and then they can replicate that to their audience. And we've targeted sort of wine specialist influencers who are SOMs, educators, who post about collectible wines. How to search for your ambassador. So the key here is kind of evidence of influence. We want to make sure that the people that you're going to be contracting are actually going to be able to represent your brand well and actually influence their audiences. So number one we look at is content creation. So does the content that they're putting out, the imagery that they're putting out, does it fit with your brand? Let's look at reach versus likes. Okay, so a lot of people will maybe have like 50,000 followers and everyone's like, wow, this is huge, they have great influence. But actually, if you think about it, like if you look at their posts, a lot of them will maybe have like 10 likes or 20 likes per post. That is not a good engagement rate. So you need to just check this kind of thing and make sure that they have the engagement rate that they should have based on the size of their following. You need to look that engagement rate is consistent. So maybe look back like 10 posts, make sure that each of them are the same in terms of the amount of likes that they've had, the amount of comments that they've had. Another great way is to look into the comments that they've put out. Like, are people just posting emojis, or are they actually putting questions, getting engaged with the comment? Where can I buy this wine? This kind of thing is a good example of somebody who I guess has good rapport with their followers. Georgie's got some excellent ones. Definitely check them out. Then you want to look into, I guess, the audience. You can do this. You can ask people, influencers, to share where their audience is based. You can do like a screenshot and they can show it. They have these stats as a creator. Something that we use, we have a software that we use which gives a kind of rating, authenticity rating for influencers. It's called Grin, and what it does is it basically checks and makes sure that they have real followers. It will see if an account has ever used a bot, or if they've had any sort of and you can also check automatically where their location is, so you don't have to ask people to do that. There's also a website called influence.co that does a similar sort of thing, but has a few less, I guess, kind of analysis tools on it.
This is your 3-minute warning, Richard.
3-minute warning. Okay, I think I should do it. I should be all right. So gifting versus paid. So a lot of, I think a lot of people are unsure of whether to send wines for free, hoping people will review, or I guess kind of, or whether they should pay an influencer to talk about their wines. And I think that these are kind of more considerations than anything else that you need to bear into account when deciding what you want to do for your campaign. One is to look at the value of the product that you have. Most influencers, if you have a wine that is available in supermarkets for about £5, realistically, most influencers can get that easily, and they're not really that excited about it. Whereas we work with people like, for instance, Vignello Chadwick, who has a wine that is $400 a bottle, and that one, most people are quite happy to receive for free and taste it and talk about it. I guess you've got to work out where that balance is. Usually over £40, most things will be free, can be paid to begin with. It's obviously to do with the relationship that you have with that influencer. Have they been on press trips with you? What's your rapport with them? In terms of reach, nanos, we obviously try and focus on your gifted partnerships, whereas a micro and above, we'd look at more probably paying them for their service, because they're more professional service. And what you want from them as a service. A lot of these people are professional chefs, writers, and you're paying for them to do great content, so you should be paying them. And I guess kind of the other thing is control. How much control do you want over the posts that you're going to be creating? Because if you want a lot of control, you're probably going to have to pay for that as well. Whereas if you're happy for somebody to talk about it, review it, then that's kind of a lot easier to do as a gifted side. How to get in touch with people. I guess most people have their contact details on their page, but you can obviously DM people, comment on their posts, just say, oh, DM'd you, have a look. In your email to them, create a kind of like overview of the campaign, maybe talk about your product, talk about the campaign dates. Loads of these people are traveling often, so you need to bear this in mind. Maybe put in something like you really like their work, highlight that, like a post that you've liked there, so they know the type of thing that you want them to create for them, and then share with them what you're trying to achieve, because these people, and maybe ask them for ideas, because these people often come up with some really cool, creative ideas that they can use that you might not have thought of. Gifted versus negotiating. If it's gifted, obviously they have the kind of, they can decide whether they want to post about it. We usually say to them, like, please post about this if you'd like to. 99% of people will do it, but obviously if they don't like the wine, probably best not to push them too hard to post about it. And then you have your when it comes to paying and negotiating with people, at the moment there's no real standard, but do take into account that different people will price differently based if they are maybe celebrities, professionals, or if they're just influencers, or who they are. What we find is a really good tactic is to just approach people with the budget that we have and ask them what they can do with it. In terms of writing a brief, key thing to note, they know their audiences better than you do. This should just be bite-sized information about your brand. Include relevant links whenever you can, tag, hashtags, think about, where can people buy the wines or products from that they're talking about. So include stockists, include hashtags that are relevant to your company. Don't try and micromanage them to talk about the hashtags that they want. And for dates, be flexible. Don't just say, like, you need to post at this date, this time, because a lot of influencers will have audiences in different countries that maybe perform better at different times of day.
Okay, Richard, we're going to have to jump in now with Georgia, if that's all right. Otherwise, she's...
All right, cool. That was my last slide.
Okay.
Sorry,
brilliant.
guys, no more reporting.
Okay, thank you very much. Richard, thank you in Georgia.
Thanks, Richard. That's great. Well, and nice to meet you, Georgia. Or should I call you Wine.Genie? Is your is your Instagram name or your influencer name. I mean, just listen to Richard there. Do you recognise a lot of what he talks about there? Is that kind of like, in terms of, I mean, do you see yourself as in the characteristics that he's been describing?
Of course, and we're actually working together. This is why I need to be very brief today. I have like 5 minutes because we're working on an amazing campaign for Cava wines. We're organizing some tastings together. So yes, what he's talking about is totally accurate. I mean, most of the brands, when they work either with agencies or directly with influencers, they're looking for people that can relate with their values, people who actually speak in a real audience, and people who bring value. So this is something that is super, super important. And currently people who want to, let's say, build a brand online, even if it's, you know, their personal brand, or if they work, let's say, for a digital agency, this is what the audience is looking for. You know, people who bring value, entertainment, infotainment. So it's like a combination in a way.
And can I ask you your background? I mean, in terms of like, did you set out to become a wine influencer, or is it something that you've evolved and developed as you built a following?
Exactly. It's not something that I was dreaming of. My background is very technical. I have studied chemical engineering. I have a master's degree. And after that, after having some experience in sales, in marketing, but mostly in a more technical kind of aspects, I decided that, I mean, I had this in mind. I don't know how, but I really, really liked the wine world. An instinct, I don't know. So I started my studies abroad. I started traveling around the world because of my studies. And I realized, let's say, this diversity in the wine communication, and also the fact that the digital communication, at least when I entered 5 years ago, it was something that was doing like baby steps. So when I started my travels, I started also blogging about it, opened my Instagram account that at that time I had zero experience on how it works. It worked. So I started blogging about it with my face, my experiences, reporting about the places I was visiting, and this went huge in a year. But it was also a different timing back then because the algorithm was different. Also the accounts talking about wine were a few. Right now we're becoming like the fashion industry, like the makeup industry. So many wine influencers coming in. Yes, and it started like that.
Okay, and just to sort of cut into the chase, I mean, if there's a wine producer or a wine business out there and they're thinking about working with someone like yourself or another wine influencer, what would be your key advice to them in terms of the questions they need to ask of an influencer to make sure they're going to get what they want?
Yes, in my opinion, and this is what I always ask to the producer, is what is their objective? So when someone just reaches you and he wants to work with you, for me it's important that he gets the value that he needs. So it's not just about, you know, me working with him and investing in something that in the end maybe it's not of value for them. So they need to know, and actually an influencer like me should send them their media kit. So numbers, audience, the interest of their audience. So the producer needs to know what you're bringing in the game. So it's important for them to know your media kit, your numbers, your values, all these things, you know, in a way.
And it's interesting. So how do you actually measure? What are the kind of key criteria that you can measure a campaign and say that's a success? Is it what are the criteria that you would use?
You can always see the numbers. I mean, most of the producers or agencies who want to work with me is because they want to have a better brand awareness. That can be maybe a new wine, or let's say a campaign, or maybe a region that wants to promote itself. Even a winery that invites you over, maybe because they want to promote their wine tourism. So you can always check the numbers, you know, the engagement, the comments. I think this is why it's so, let's say it's an industry the digital advertising, that it's so fast and also so effective because the numbers are always out there.
Yeah, so for you, you're in a way, you're acting like a publisher. You're having to microanalyze your own data and use your own data to then promote yourself rather than just relying on your posts.
Exactly. It's a different way of communicating your work. We're like a digital magazine, you know, so we communicate, let's say, your project, but also through our personality, humor. We are real people, you know, and this is something that makes people connect with us. It's like following our adventure, our story. It's what they say, let's say in the cinematic kind of term, like the hero's journey. So it's fun for the audience to watch.
And just finally, are you continuously comparing yourself to other influencers and learning from other influencers about how you can improve what you do or give a point of difference?
Can you please repeat? I didn't understand the question.
When you're trying to become a better influencer, do you take inspiration from other influencers to see what they're doing? And
of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I think that in any type of industry that you're into, you want to check the competition. So for me, it's not about the wine. I'm always getting inspiration from what influences in general people. So I will look into the food bloggers, fashion, makeup, fitness, everything that is trending actually. So especially in our industry, that it's more about the marketing, you need to be creative every time. So you shouldn't be like living in your own bubble in a way. You need to always see what is out there. And I remember actually when a professor of mine, when I was studying in the wine marketing, and I presented my, in the end, you know, my presentation, my thesis on wine marketing. And I already grew my account because of these studies. My professors told me, Georgia, your presentation is so boring. What is happening with you? And I was like, I had no clue about marketing at that time. So I was so stressed to find the right terms to create this presentation. And they told me that if you want to be successful in marketing, just break the rules. And this is something that I always, you know, remember from that time, because what I actually did at that time was that I broke in a way the rules that I had no clue at the time. But yes, marketing is about that. It's about, you know, take the rules, but then create your own.
Well, brilliant. And well, you're clearly doing a fantastic job. So congratulations on the impact you've made. And we'll look forward to seeing what you do in the future. So thanks for your time today. And good luck with your...
Thank you so much.
Good luck with your tastings. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.
Okay, cheers. Okay, we're going to move on now to have a chat with Robert. So Robert, if you could press your little video button. Excellent. Nice to have you on. So here the opportunity really is now to just spend some time talking to Robert Chin, who's the chief executive of the Aquilini beverage group, who are sort of actually, I'll tell you what, why don't you explain who the Aquilini beverage group is to those who don't know you, and we can perhaps go from there.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Sophie. Panelists, nice to meet everyone and everyone from around the world. Really a pleasure to share our company and some of the things that we're doing. The Aquilini Beverage Group is a division of the Aquilini Group out of Vancouver, BC, in Canada. And it's a global multinational corporation, really spans 3 verticals primarily. One of them is in real estate and commercial and residential. The second was sports and entertainment. Within that portfolio, arts and professional sports teams, most notably the Vancouver Canucks of the National Hockey League, as well as several esports teams around the world. And then there's the third vertical, which is food and hospitality, which is the division that I'm in, which includes everything to do with beverages, alcohol beverages, and soon non-alcohol beverages. So that's really the gist of our company. It's been around since 1956. It's privately held, and it's run by the Aquilini family, who are immigrants from Brescia, Italy, and made Vancouver their home back in, as I said, 1956.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, the reason why I asked you to give that context is because obviously we've invited you on today to talk about the changes and the steps that you've taken since you came on board? Like 2 years ago, you joined as chief executive?
2.5 years ago.
2.5 years ago, yeah. Okay, great. So, and in that time, from what I understand, you've taken a business that previously was dealing a lot in bulk supply to the sector and didn't necessarily have many of its own brands. And in that time, you radically changed the way it works, and you've introduced like nearly 10 separate different brands to the market. So, do you want to just give us an idea that when you came in, how you sold that vision to a company that was working very differently before, and how you actually got ahead and done that?
Absolutely. The history of the company was really founded on, agriculture, in this division at least, agriculture and bulk wine, as I mentioned. Obviously, the bulk wine business, as many of you know, the beverage industry, is not the most profitable business to be in. And my background, having spent most of my career at E&J Gallo Winery, my background is really from a branded marketing perspective. Many brands that Gallo has in the marketplace, whether it be in the UK or in the United States or other parts of the world, I had the fortune of having worked on those brands behind the scenes in some capacity. And I think once I came on board, the first thing that was obvious to me is we had to change our business model, and changing our business model meant moving from bulk wine into finished goods. And that's really what we did. And a lot of these brands were all created with a specific objective in mind. And, that objective was really with a sound understanding of what retailers, consumers, and our distributors wanted. Because as some of you know, there's a 3-tier system here in the US. You have to sell through a distributor, who then in turn sells to a retailer, and then of course they sell to the consumer. So we created these brands to go towards finished goods, largely because of the ability to pivot in times of hardship in the industry, profit potential, gross margin potential, which are significantly greater towards finished goods. But we adopted a very specific strategy. We did not go to distributors first. We actually went to retailers first. And we knew that retailers would actually drive what distributors brought in. Having a distributor here in the US is one of the most hardest or most difficult things to actually accomplish. And we thought by going to retailers first, there was one fundamental insight that drove that. Retailers often cover several states in the United States. Distributors often cover one state in the United States. So in other words, if you can get a retailer to agree to go bring in your product, you're essentially knocking on a distributor's door and saying, here are 5 states that we're going to bring you instantly. So then all of a sudden, you don't have to go make 5 state distributor calls. You just make one call, and then it gets transferred across the respective distributor organizations.
So when you're all having those conversations with retailers, what was it about the brand propositions that you were presenting that they found so appealing?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost in this industry, it has to start with quality. And we have an all-star winemaking team here in Eastern Washington. I'm actually calling in from the Red Mountain AVA in Eastern Washington. I live in Dallas, but I'm here in wine country in Washington. And we assembled an all-star winemaking team. We have Philippe Melka, who is the winemaker for some of the premium wines in our portfolio. You see one of them behind me, which is part of the Atelier Melka organization with Mayan Kaczynski. And then we also have Josh Maloney, who's also a very prominent winemaker here in the state of Washington. So quality was one of the key things. And we're proud to say that every SKU in our portfolio has actually scored 90 plus among all the major trade publications. I think that was the most important thing. I think the second thing is that we brought to the table was really brands with some sort of story or meaning that were relevant. We made a conscious decision that every brand in our portfolio were based on true stories. There's a story behind everything, every label. And then on top of that, if it's not a true story, there's an element of human truth. For example, we have a brand called Be Human, which all of our marketing is centered around basic human values, whether it be giving or whether it be diversity, et cetera, et cetera. And you look at the brand Eroe. Eroe is hero in English. It's an Italian word. And really, that's really a tribute to the patriarch of this company, et cetera. But really, those true stories were very important. And I think the third thing is we brought to the table is a company that really understands the digital economy. And I think in any wine brand today, there has to be a firm understanding of digital. And digital can mean a lot of things. But I think when it comes to digital, it encompasses several different areas. Things like social, things like search, things like content, things like understanding how the various platforms work, how consumers engage with content, et cetera. And we really promoted our digital capabilities. And largely, we've assembled a team that really have an extensive background in that space.
So, and was that part of that selling into the retailer then, to tell them that you were going to be able to, I don't know, build traffic, build noise, build consumer appeal for your brands that are going to be on their shelf, or was that more for a separate digital approach?
I'm sorry, Richard. Please.
Was that, sorry, was the digital what you just described from a digital point of view? Was that part of selling it into the retailer? Was that an important part of that conversation?
Absolutely. I think one of the things as you engage with retailers here in the United States, at least, and my guess is it's really every retailer in the world, is it's like everyone, they're starving for content. And I think if you as a supplier can bring a retailer content that they can then amplify on their website to further engage their consumers, to stay on their site, to share it, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's something that really came across loud and clear in all of our interactions with, every major retailer in the country.
Okay, well, we'll go look into that a bit more when we bring in Paul in a minute. But going back to storytelling, because I mean, let's face it, lots of people can tell a story, but not everyone's a good storyteller. I mean, for you, what are those skills in telling a good story? Because I mean, you may have an idea for a good brand, but what are the kind of the tricks or the sort of the opportunities that you think wine brands really need to get right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you go ask 10 people, you're going to probably get 10 different answers when it comes to storytelling. But I think the most fundamental thing with storytelling, I think some of our panelists actually said it earlier today, it has to be authentic. It has to be authentic. There needs to be some basis of authenticity to the story. It has to be something that could be readily shared. It has to be, I think at its core, it has to be something that has an emotional connection to the consumer, something that they can relate to. One of the brands that I think does a really good job at that in our portfolio is a brand called Roaming Dog. And Roaming Dog is perhaps, if this were a Harvard Business School project, it would be the textbook example of storytelling, in my opinion. We found a dog wandering near our vineyards about 4 years ago, and the vineyards team actually adopted that dog. And that dog actually goes to work every day. I kid you not. I'm here in Red Mountain, Washington, and I was actually with that dog yesterday. And we created a brand around that dog called Roaming Dog, and every piece of content that we've created is really an homage to that dog. But I think we took it one step further, and we've partnered up with the ASPCA here in the United States, which is an organization to provide funding and support towards rescued animals around the country, where we donate $1 for every bottle of Roaming Dog wine that we sell. And it's especially important because that emotional connection comes into play because 3/4 of the people here in the United States own a pet of some sort, and 90% of the time that's more than likely to be a dog. And it's something that I don't think there's been a retailer that's actually said no to bringing the product in so far.
Yeah, that's a fantastic connection. I mean, and as you say, the whole animal loving thing, wine loving, bring those two together. I mean, you mentioned earlier there about your background with Gallo. I mean, do you think that kind of branded approach that Gallo clearly has is obviously helped you in your current role?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's the branded approach that Gallo teaches you. I was at Gallo for the significant majority of my career. This is my 31st year in the wine industry. And I think what Gallo did was actually not only a branded perspective of learning, but it's also understanding how the various aspects of the supply chain works, i.e., it's an overused phrase, but really from grape to glass. And that's the one thing that they teach you at Gallo is how do you get that product to market? And how do you know how a distributor works, or how do you know how a retailer works? That entire supply chain is part of the education of working in the organization. And I would probably say it's been pivotal to our success.
Yeah, great. Okay. And just finally, in terms of like future trends, where do you see the future for kind of how develop brands like yourself? Because obviously, there's a retailer angle, they've got the entree, but where else do you see the opportunity for brands to develop?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we're going to hear this probably every single panelist for the next few years. It absolutely has to be e-commerce. And e-commerce, and I think e-commerce means a couple of different things. If you look at the wine industry here in the US, for those of you that are not familiar with it, there are rules and regulations pretty much across the country, 50 states here in the US, and perhaps there's a little bit of embellishment here. There's arguably 50 different state laws, 50 different countries, I should say, across this country. And I think e-commerce is starting to grow. And if there's been one positive effect of the pandemic, that's perhaps one positive effect of the pandemic is more consumers are engaging with e-commerce. The statistics are bearing out. It's actually bringing in more millennials, that very sought after group that wine companies have been trying to go after for a lot of years is now starting to pay rewards. And I think the second part of e-commerce is really this international D2C sector. International D2C is a very, very small component of the wine industry today. Some estimates say it's somewhere between 6 and 10 million US dollars, which is very, very small in the whole grand scheme of thing in an industry here in the US that, is probably 70 to 75 billion dollars in terms of wine. So I would say those two things, Richard, e-commerce here in the US, and then the second part of that is international D2C.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's a very good appropriate time to perhaps invite Paul Mabry to join us as well. So Paul, if you could click on your video as well.
I got out of the closet for you. So.
Okay, good. So I don't know if you picked up on there what Robert was saying around the whole role of international. I mean, is it because I guess with Pix, there's the new wine search discovery platform that you're building. I mean, is that part of that new future that you're hoping to capitalize on?
Well, absolutely. I think that distance-based DTC, whether it's even the United States, who is really underperforming in how we're reaching the total state footprint, or whether it's getting to other countries, is fundamental. And there's so much growth in that kind of market expansion. If you look at DTC in general, and I'm sure Robert can look at his stats, most of his wineries probably receive 90% or 80% of their sales within a 90-mile radius of the tasting room. That's a lot of market share that's not being touched by those activities. But I definitely have to echo him about it's not just e-commerce, it's digital in general. How do we touch those people in different places? And it's got to be core to our DNA going forward.
Okay, can I ask you, Paul, because I know with Pix, can you just sort of, with part of today's debate is all around brand building and how do you create a brand? And we've heard Robert there about the idea of, brands having values and storytelling and the human connection and things that you can pick up and touch and feel. But I guess you're creating something that you can't actually necessarily touch and feel and pick up and take home. You're creating more of a sort of a platform, aren't you? You're creating more of a Spotify for wine, a delivery for wine. I mean, can you give us an insight into how do you create a brand for Pix?
Well, a brand like Pix is about building a utility. It's about making something that helps the customer at a regular time. And our utility, from a brand perspective, allows Robert to reach through us, whether it's on e-commerce or at a shelf or in a restaurant, to reach through and have a message there and talk to the consumer directly through our platform, as it were. And there's no better place to talk to the consumer than at point of purchase, right? That's when they're having the challenge of buying. That's the most important part, to either reinforce their buying decisions or change their mind. No platform in history has been able to do that in a way that is seamless, disintermediated, and really gives Robert the ability to target narrowcast the way he wants to talk to all the different consumers.
But is that part of a challenge, though? I mean, clearly you can build the infrastructure, the software, the technology that allows people to do that. But unless people don't necessarily know what Pix is, how do you elevate the word to people actually, or does that all come through the search and people come through the?
Yeah. So you're asking how you build brand building with Pix itself, I guess. Let me rephrase that question. So our job is to help Robert build his brand, obviously, and tell the messages and the stories through us. And storytelling always comes through content, information, and different pieces. As it relates to Pix, our job to do storytelling is to go out and do, the block and tackling it takes to, first of all, start with a good product that solves a problem and makes people use it at a high frequency. Our stat that we use is recurring monthly active users. It's something that no one else is looking at measuring in the tech world. Everyone tends to inflate vanity numbers and try to be big. I want active users that come back again and again. But secondly, it's about the real block and tackling around PR, your culture and your brand, your storytelling. So our storytelling is, our job is to help consumers find wines that bring them joy. We're a discovery platform. I fundamentally believe that discovery is the way that people find new wines, right? Roaming Dog is an example. I probably wouldn't have been able to find that, but in fact, right now we're going to be doing a lot of merchandising. We're going to be doing a lot of making the wine category smaller. So Joe Fattorini, who leads our trade, is like, let's put together a whole catalog area that has wines with dog labels on it, right? Or wine labels with dogs on it. There's a whole audience that appeals to that, right? And to Robert's point, and has those wineries that are give to charity, and making this big category small and then really driving that forward. I think that that's fundamental to wine. And then our story, we're this great entity to help everyone else. We're here to talk to the consumer. Our brand is about how we talk to our consumers. If you see our messaging, making them love us. I talk to our team every day. Our job is to make our consumers love us, because retention is fundamental to our success. So if I make Robert happy, and sorry, Robert, I keep using your name because I'm looking at your wonderful face in the center of my screen and able to talk to your brands. But if I make him happy, he'll give some word of mouth and tell more people. He'll share that brand out there. And whenever I have wine, Pix always helps me out. It does a great job.
So Robert, throwing back to you, I mean, you mentioned earlier about that you see this international DCC as a massive opportunity. I mean, is that something that something like that Aquilini itself would look to? Does it kind of need a Pix or an alternative to help you do that, or how do you see that actually managing itself in terms of the growth?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll answer that kind of in two ways. I'm a sucker for technology, period, over and out. I mean, I think you would be naive not to look at every piece of technology that's coming out there. And I think it's a fair statement and perhaps an indictment on the wine industry, but we have been absolutely incredibly slow versus any other industry when it comes to technology. So something like Pix, absolutely, it's something to consider in terms of the whole consideration set. And I think in terms of international D2C, look, the people that are watching here on our team here, I think come November 1st, you're going to see flags from all over the world pop up on our website. And I should add, for those of you that don't know our company, we only shipped our first bottle of wine, I kid you not, about 16, 17 months ago. So if some of you are probably scratching your head, who are these guys? Well, there's a lot of people in the US saying, who are these guys? But we're in pretty much every major retailer's banners in some state in the United States. And it's all been done in the last 16 to 18 months. So look out for our website. Shameless plug, our wine club launches in a couple of weeks, but you will see several flags. We've obviously put our Canadian friends first, since we're a Canadian company. And you'll see the Canada flag there. I think it's already up. And because a lot of people in the UK are on here today, we're going to put up the British flag, the UK flag, I should say, in the next little bit too as well.
Excellent. All right. Okay. Well, thanks for that. We'll perhaps bring in Robin Copestick and Kevin Shaw to join us into this debate as well. So if Robin and Kevin, if you could, Kevin, you're right. Good to see you, sir. And Robin, are you there? I'm sure. You just do your video, Chief.
It won't work.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Okay. It's all right. Well, we can hear you anyway. So, just bringing you into this conversation, which obviously we've been talking about how the importance of brands and how you build a brand, and you, Kevin, through your design work, and Robin, obviously working with Fraser and Copestick, you are all about brands. A bit of a glib question, I suppose, but Robin, if I come to you first, I mean, just picking what Robert was saying earlier, what do you see as being the key to being a successful wine brand? I mean, you must have your team come to you all the time saying, I've got this idea for a brand. We think that we could do X and Y. What are the key criteria that you say it has to hit these before we press the go button?
Well, I think you have to start with the consumer and what the consumer wants. And that's basically done by research and knowledge. So finding out what the consumer wants to drink, what they feel comfortable buying, what's the right price, what's the right packaging. But it all comes from the consumer. It's not from a gut feel. It's there is knowledge out there to be had, and I think our company has been very good at attaining and using that knowledge.
Okay, and when you say the consumer, is that literally just through consumer trends, consumer behaviour, looking at Nielsen stats? When you say that, how do you actually drill into that?
But all of that and more. So we talk to consumers ourselves. Obviously, we follow the data and we follow the sort of past experiences. But the tricky thing really is to find out what's the next brand. And sometimes no amount of data will get you that, particularly when it's historical data. But you can do that by focus groups from consumers and talking to consumers and learning what they're enjoying drinking and where they're thinking, not just in the wine world, but from outside of the wine world.
Okay, Kevin, can I ask you the same question? I mean, obviously you're working on different brands all the time. I mean, can you sniff out or tell when you get given a brief that this is a brand that you really think has the right criteria to go forward, or what are the things that you specifically look for when you want to work on what you think could be a good brand to work on?
I think you've got to be kind of careful with, as Robin said, with historical research, because I always remember that Henry Ford quote about, if I'd asked consumers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, right? There's other things that are coming in. We're seeing more and more, I think I spoke last time about the sustainability things coming in on every brief. And it's starting to expand now to causes and issues, I think. And a lot of this, I think, come across from the wokeism. And wokeism is a polarizing subject. You know, some people might think it's gone a little bit too far, but I think everybody can agree that there's some merit in some of the stuff that's being said, and the issues that are getting on. So, you know, we're doing projects based on brands that are owned and run and made by women. We're doing things that are launching in Black History Week month. So these are things that I've not really seen that much of before. And certainly when you're building stories and wanting to have some theme to put on a label, I mean, I would say to everybody, have a little pity for your poor beleaguered designer, because we're sick of putting mountains on labels. I mean, it just doesn't work anymore. You know, I mean, we need something to talk about. We need something to scream about these days. And so get your elevator pitch together. Get it really focused. I don't care what it is, but be really sharp. I like what Robert was saying about having a story behind every product, even if it's a dog, but it's a story, and it's an interesting story. And then he's getting the brand attached to themes, and that, my God, that for a designer, that's just a joy to work with. You know, I can do anything. You give me a dog, I'll give you gold.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of companies have, like, you know, the cause-related marketing team, which tends to be more, you know, behind the scenes. When in a way, you're saying that now's the time for that to become the front foot and actually the face of the company.
Go on the label. We've just redesigned, you know, a big Argentine brand, and to make it more incredible, sustainable story, but to bring it more onto the front of the label. It's time to shout about what you've got, and to be proud of it, and take a stance.
Yeah, maybe come back to you, Robin. Is that an area where, because I know you work obviously closely with lots of retailers, and is that something that you're hearing back from them as well in terms of that thirst for brands that actually stand for something for their customers?
I wish that was the case.
Right.
The UK retailers at the moment seem to be obsessed with sort of celebrity wines, and I think as an industry we can do a lot better than that, and we should be doing more for sustainable causes. And, you know, I think everything is, obviously all wine brands and all wine companies have got to make a profit, but if there's added value in putting a celebrity name on a label and adding £2 to the retail price, surely we can do better than that by putting something back to a charity or a sustainable cause. I don't think we're doing enough for that. And I actually do think the consumers are genuinely interested in that.
Yeah, you created, was it the Care is Wild brand?
It was Care for Wild. So that is raising money for a sanctuary in northern South Africa that looks after baby rhinos whose mothers have been sort of killed for their horn, that goes off to China and Taiwan. And we've had some good success with that, but none of the big retailers have really picked up on it, unfortunately. So we've sold it into through online and some specialist retailers. So I'm not unhappy with the progress, but it could have been a lot better. I think there's a lot that can be done. You know, I think the wine industry in general has got to do a lot more with sustainability and also diversity, and promoting diversity and inclusion. And I think there's a, if the retailers would work with us, I think there's a lot that we can do with wine that could give something back to those sort of causes and promote those sort of issues, which are very much in line with what's happening in the world.
It's interesting you say, because you just obviously thought that there's clearly a consumer demand for that, or consumer interest, but perhaps there's actually a disconnect between what retailers actually want to put on their shelves as opposed to what they want to put in on their nice advertising on TV.
Yeah, we're trying hard, and we'll keep trying.
Yeah.
And hopefully we will get somebody to it, because I'm convinced if we can get it to work properly, then the consumers will really go for it. And we're seeing it in the retailers and the online markets that we're selling, how popular it is, and we get loads and loads of communication from consumers saying how much they enjoyed the wine and how great it was that they are contributing, money back to a cause that means a lot to them.
Yeah. I'm aware we've actually got quite a large American audience as well today. So Robert, looking at the US retailers, you mentioned before how much retailers really dictate a lot of what your thinking is. Is that value-driven, cause-driven, something which is perhaps a bit more likely to happen in America at the moment?
First of all, I think cause-driven is it's not only an American thing. I would probably say it's fair to say that it's any country in the world, any buyer in the world. I just want to build on what Robin and Kevin were saying, though, and it's really about this focus on the consumer. And it's just my own philosophical perspective that may or may not be relevant to many others in the industry. I think it's important that we think about the consumer, but I also think it's important we think about the distributor here in the US. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We are coming out with a whiskey product that's coming out in Q1 2022. And our strategy was obviously a consumer need that drove the creation of that product. The brand is called Blockhead. And we also, though, looked at who the key competitors were. And we specifically noticed that those key competitors are not within a distributor portfolio that carries our products in the US. So now all of a sudden we're able to arm our distributors with this Blockhead brand to go into stores where the distributor has no competing product in their portfolio. We have another product called Beautiful Drinks Company, which is an RTD product here in the US. And it's all about pollinators and supporting the pollinator community. Well, I'm not going to say who the retailer is. You can go Google who they are. They're one of the largest in the world, but they're all about supporting the pollinator community. There's that shared value. Yes, it's important to consumers, but there's two examples there where it's important to the distributor and it's also important to the retailer in terms of beyond the consumer.
Yeah, and Paul, I know with Pix, the value aspect to it, which might sound strange for a technology company to be, but I know the value infrastructure has been very important in terms of how you've presented Pix.
I have to follow what Robert said. The reality is if you're not customer centric and serving the customer in your utility and your tool, you're not providing value, right, in that piece. And the value isn't necessarily the lowest price. The value is the way they get the information, the way they can buy the wine, the story that you're able to provide, how fast you can be. Those are all elements of value. So, but it's, to everyone's point, that consumer centricity is everything about. Every screen that we have has been designed by the consumer, the closed beta, open beta. And it's also every way that we're trying to learn is we're listening to our customer on the other side. We're asking the wineries, what do you need? How do you want to touch the consumer? Retailers, how do you want to sell to consumers? Let's not replace you. Let's augment you and help you do more sales. So I think that that's really fundamental, is that consumer centricity on all points. We need a lot more of that in the wine industry instead of mountains on labels, as Kevin says.
Yeah, but Kevin, coming back to you, in your career working in design in drinks in particular, do you think the demands on you now as a designer are different in terms of what you need to be able to present in terms of like understanding what the consumer is, or is a lot of it still comes down to the craft of actually creation of your own visions, as it were? You need to unmute.
Sorry about that. I think in the past we would make stuff up a lot more, and I don't know whether that's the fact that we dig more to try and find Robert's dog, or is it the fact that people or our clients are getting more or getting smarter about having a USP or something that they can build their brand on. And I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean, those days where we just kind of have a nothing product with a nothing story and just kind of call it Table Mountain or knife pot, whatever. There would be those days. I think are gone. We don't get those meetings anymore.
I mean, I know you have said in the past, there's those meetings you have sometimes when someone will literally just bring you in and say, well, give us a brand, give us an idea. You're it's moved on at least from there.
Yeah, no, like I say, I think people are getting, I think clients are getting smarter. I think brands are getting smarter. I think the products that they come in with, there's always, there seems to be things that are attached to them now that we can work with as designers. It makes our life a lot easier. With people making their vodka from waste fruit. I mean, that's such a lovely story. I can do that all day. So anything that stands out and is different and we haven't seen a million times. I mean, I'd struggle to do another, just a straight Chilean Malbec. I think I've done 50 and that's enough for anyone. Smarter stories.
Robin, can I come back to you? Do you think in terms of the skills we have in the drinks industry, do we need to be looking, I mean, both Robert and Paul were talking before about the digital. I mean, for a company like yourself, are you looking to try and elevate your more digital skills in your business and bring in different kind of talents that perhaps you may have needed 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry, did you say Robin or Richard?
Go Robin first, and then you, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, always, we're always looking at other talent and not necessarily for experience in the wine industry. And yeah, I mean, it's really important. I do think that as an industry, we talk ourselves down a lot. I think we are a lot better than we give ourselves credit for. But at the same time, I do think that always looking at people from other industries has a benefit. And actually, in our company now, we have people from Procter & Gamble and other FMCG companies that add to the experience and knowledge of somebody like me who's worked all my life in the wine industry. But I really enjoy learning and hearing about other people's examples, especially when they've worked for the big FMCG companies.
And the digital aspect, and when you're perhaps a brand like iHeart, when that first came to fruition, are you now looking, when you're creating brands, about the digital aspect to it as well? Is this going to work online? Is the imagery, is the story, has it got a digital angle to it, or should a good brand work across all channels anyway?
I think definitely a good brand should work across all channels, but online is here to stay and is here to grow. So it is very important. And I think, from what everybody was saying as well, one of the advantages online, it is quite easy to tell a story. So those brands with a story, as opposed to just seeing a label on a supermarket shelf and having to read the back label, online shopping actually makes it a lot more accessible for a consumer who is maybe a little bit more, scared about buying wine, because nobody's going to see you reading the descriptions online. So they are going to be able to spend more time and find something that they want without feeling that somebody is looking down on them for their lack of knowledge. So online is hugely important, but it has to work in all sectors as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So Robert, just going back to you, the question I asked Robin initially about the skills and looking to bring in new people into your company, perhaps to help you move to the next step. Is that something that is relevant to you?
Yes, absolutely, Richard. I think I'm just going to echo a little bit about what Robin said, because I absolutely agree with him. And, I'll use a term that often gets, what I would say, it's not defined to the fullest, and that term is diversity. We've made a conscious decision in terms of creating a diverse team, but that diversity is not the obvious way of what most people think of diversity. We also look at diversity in the context of people's backgrounds as well. So I think it's dangerous to go build a wine or alcohol beverage organization, especially from the strategic perspective or the marketing perspective, where everyone is from the wine industry or everyone's from the alcohol beverage industry. So we have a team of people from the beauty industry, casual dining. We've actually brought in agencies that have diverse experiences across industries, because I think it's important that, we use the word consumer behavior, but we're also looking for people that understand consumer behavior beyond the wine industry. How are people behaving in restaurants? How are they behaving in fashion and so forth? Much like what the earlier panelist was referring to.
Okay. There's an interesting view here actually from David Gates, so who was previously managing director of the Diageo's Futures team, and I think perhaps picking up a little bit also what Tamar was saying right at the beginning of the conversation about looking at potential disruptive factors outside the drinks industry, about what impact they might have on our sector going forward. And I mean, and clearly technology is one of those things, but just looking further forward, I mean, where would you see any particular disruptive influences that we need to be aware of and perhaps be responding to? Paul, can I perhaps throw that at you?
Sorry, say that again. You roll up a little bit there, cut out for just a second there, Richard. So can you ask that question?
Yeah, beg your pardon. It's just looking at disruptive influences outside the sector, outside of drinks, that we perhaps need to be more aware of. Just picking up on what Tamar was saying in her first session, are there areas that you think, when you're planning picks and looking forward, that we need to be also planning for and making sure that we're, it might be around regulation, it might be around distribution, it might be around tariff barriers,
We're getting pressure from all sides, and the wine industry is getting pressure from other out-bev industry items, or even non-alcoholic beverage items. It's getting pressure from the modernization of e-commerce and the speed by which that innovates, or by a delivery, which didn't exist in the same meaningful way until 18 months ago. I mean, candidly, there's pressures that have been happening around wine for a long time, and we've been resisting them pretty successfully until COVID. I think what we're going to see, to be really honest with you, is our ability to participate in the acceleration of the gap of knowledge and the gap of experience and the gap of technologies to actually get up to modern standards. And the whiplash that's going to occur in our industry is going to be pretty significant. And we're already seeing it. It's hard to catch up with not doing something for 20 years and then try to do it instantly overnight. There's a lot of learning to do. As Robert said, digital is a big thing. It's not one category. Marketing is not one thing anymore. And how do we learn all these special niches that have matured over 2 decades?
Yeah, Kevin, can I throw that at you? I mean, in your design world, and what kind of influences do you look at to think, I need to be aware of that, I need to keep myself on top of that, or what are the sort of the areas that makes you keeps you awake at night?
Yeah, I mean, we dabble in all other things as well, cannabis and perfume and stuff, and I am, and obviously spirits, all kind of spirits, beers, seltzers. So I'm always cross-referencing and cross-pollinating with all these other things. The wine industry has always been positively glacial in its pace of evolution, and I think that there's a lot of opportunities that are missed out there. And we've seen how seltzers kind of came in, and just then all the spirits companies got on the back of it. I think we've done like 5 tequila seltzers this year. We've not done one wine seltzer. I don't know what it is about the wine industry that makes it very slow to move, but I think we've done more cannabis innovations this year than in the whole of the history of our company within the wine business. And I think there's so many things that we could try, and I think maybe it's down to what Robin said about the retailers. We need to get more retailers on board who are open to trying new things, who can showcase innovation a little bit more.
Right. Well, if there are any retailers watching you want to share that, then please would love to have you.
We'll do the work for free. That's how passionate I always have been about innovation in the wine business.
Yeah. Well, Robin, can I ask you? I mean, what are the things that keep you awake at night in terms of where you think the drinks industry is going, and the things that you need to be fast tracking or being?
Sure. I mean, definitely the issue that I mentioned about sustainability, and that's in production, as well as thinking about just being better for the planet and creating brands that can do some good. So it's from the start, it's from the production, and I do know that that's something that most of certainly our company and most of our competitors are looking at seriously. So it will happen. But I mean, just to echo Kevin as well, I mean, it is a bit more bravery and trust is required from the big retailers. I don't know why, because BWS, i.e. beers, wines and spirit, is often sits in the same category with the same sort of overarching manager, but spirits and beer can seem to get away with a lot more innovation. And you know, Kevin and I have done quite a lot of work together in the past. I can assure you we're not glacial in our innovation. We just can't get innovation to go through, and without a customer there's not much we can do about it. So you know, we do need the buyers to be on board, and it's quite cyclical. We'll have conversations, we'll have retailers who go, come on, we want to be the first to hear about the innovation that you're about to do, and we get close to making progress, but not enough happens quickly enough certainly compared to beer and spirits and compared to other industries. But you know, back to my first point, I think sustainability is a key thing, and it's something that is going to be more key as we go forward, and people have got to take it seriously now.
Yeah, excellent. And Robert, can I ask you that question? Well, what are the disruptive influences that keep yourself and Aquilini? I mean, I know you're working in lots of different sectors as well, which I guess exacerbates that, but or potentially helps at the same time. But what keeps you awake at night?
You know, it's like being under siege every day. I can't really give you one specific thing, but I mean, I'll give you a couple of quick examples. I mean, the last 6 months, we've dealt with everything from glass shortages, capsule shortages, partition shortages, shipper shortages. Then I saw a press release. Now we have label shortages, truck driver shortages. And then on top of that, we go into your average grocery or liquor store in the US, and you have something like 2,000 to 5,000 SKUs, and you have to go try to get someone's attention in the store. I would probably say, you know, in spite of all that, if I were to pick one specific thing, it's how do you break through to clutter? That's really it. It's perhaps the most obvious thing, but how do you break through to clutter? When you go into your average grocery store in the US, of which we have, you know, a third of the country sells in grocery stores, and trying to permeate that entire sea of wine when most of your consumers going into the store are not that wine knowledgeable. How do you differentiate yourself? That's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, sounds like we need a search engine for wine, but anyway, I'll leave that for another day. Sophie, can I thank you for all our panel for your time, and obviously to Richard, Georgia, and Tamara for their presentations earlier. So Sophie, do you want to come back on board? And
yeah, just to say again, thank you to the panel. There will be a recording sent round in the next few days, and everyone that heard Kevin offer stranger and stranger work for free, I suggest you get in touch with him quickly before he forgets. But no, thank you all very much to our panelists, and thank you all of you for joining.
Good afternoon. Thank you.